Every day, our voices crushed, but we will continue the fight, said Soni Soni. Fight we have to, because the movement has to go on. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome all of you present here to the state-level seminar on Women's Movements, Histories and Narratives, Revisiting the Journey, organized by the Women and Gender Development Cell and IQAC Scottish Church College in collaboration with the Departments of Philosophy, History and Political Science. At the very outset, I would like to invite our Principal Ma'am, Dr. Mudhumanjari Mondol, to the dais to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Shushmita. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Professor Dr. Purabi Roy, retired professor, Department of International Relations, JADAVPUR University. One of our eminent alumni, Professor Dr. Malini Bhattacharya, retired professor, Department of English, again from JADAVPUR University, who have notable contributions in the field of women's studies. Dr. Supratim Das, our Vice Principal and renowned historian. Dr. Samrat Bhattacharya, IQAC Coordinator of our college. Dr. Rajashree Ghosh, Bursar. Dr. Vidisha Sinha, Senator Secretary. Dr. Narayan Chandra Das, PC Secretary. Convener of the Women and Gender Development Cell, Scottish Church College. Dr. Ishita Shur, and under her patronage, all other members of this very important cell, Dr. Indrani Kaur from the Department of Sanskrit, Dr. Vidisha Sinha, Department of Bengali, Dr. Kakuli Mukhopadhyay, Department of Teacher Education, Dr. Devjani Ghosh, Department of Chemistry, Dr. Shushmita Gonsalves, Department of Pol Science, Dr. Miss Richa Aurora, Department of Microbiology, all other colleagues from the Department of Political Science, Philosophy and History who are present, and colleagues from our collaborator colleges, Victoria Institution, and from Ramakrishna Sharada Mission Mahavidyalaya, the students who will present papers in the afternoon session, and they are 29 in numbers, who are either from our college or from Victoria Institution, Sharada Mission and Chandannagar College. On behalf of Scottish Church College family, I welcome you all. Though 8th March was the International Women's Day, we could not organize any event on that day due to university examinations. And today, our Women and Gender Development Cell is observing the Women's Day. I feel each and every day we should remember the contributions of different women whom we come across from dawn to dusk. But today we have organized the seminar to pay our tribute and homage to two eminent ladies whose contributions towards our society in particular and towards nation at large are remarkable. We are thankful to both of you, ma'am, that you have accepted our invitation, and we are eagerly waiting to listen to you. I hope the audience who are waiting eagerly to listen to you will enjoy every bit of your speech and learn a lot out of those. I also would like to appreciate the young students who have shown their willingness to participate in the paper presentation session. I wish you all the best, dear students. Yes, we have a lot to say, but remember that this is the time to work and work only without much noise. I think the Women and Gender Development Cell members and the members of the IQAC of Scottish Church College deserves a big round of applause at this moment for organizing this wonderful seminar for us today. And at the end, I would like to recite few lines on women. Women are strong, women are brave. There is nothing in this world a woman can't face. When times feel rough and we feel like despair, we needn't look far, there is always one there. A strong woman that is not hard to find. She is right in the center of both you and I. Yet, we look in the mirror and struggle to see. The reflection staring back is all that we need. For she is pretty, she is funny, she is smart. It's true, yes, that woman you see is you. She is you, she is me, she is our daughters to be. So stand tall, be proud. You are everything you need. May God bless us all. Thanks.
Said Virginia Woolf, women have served all these centuries as looking glasses that reflect the figure of a man as 2 times the normal size. It is time to invert the looking glass. It is time to revisit the journey, the women's movement, and once again go back to the old narratives. To introduce today's seminar, I would invite our Vice Principal Sir, Dr. Shupratim Das, to the dais.
Very good morning. We have 2 very eminent and well-known scholars among us today. So all of us, we look forward very eagerly hearing from them. But surely, I must convey my thanks and congratulations to the 4 departments, History, Political Science, Philosophy and the Teacher Education Department, who are organizing this very highly required seminar this morning. Now the topic is interesting because it takes us back to a long trajectory and it really gives us a flavor of a historical hindsight. Now because this relates to histories and narratives and talks about revisiting a journey, let me make some references, very straight references. Actually, there are so many versions of the history or rather histories of the women's movement in India. One of the standard ones is to divide the periods, move from reformist efforts to post-freedom ethos, and then the so-called new women's movement, which is suggested is more radical and which also came into being with the 1975 landmark, the first United Nations World Conference on Women. I would refer Ritu Menon here, from her book Making a Difference, memoirs from the women's movement in India, and also I would refer to Shomita Sen's Toward a Feminist Politics, the Indian women's movement in historical perspective. As Ritu writes, it is difficult now, this is very significant standing today, it is difficult now in this new century to recapture or imagine the enormous optimism of those early years of what is called the second wave of the women's movement in India. And Shomita Sen writes, I'm quoting, the women's movement in India took off in the 1920s, building on the 19th century social reform movement. The women's movement progressed during the period of high nationalism and the freedom struggle, both of which shaped its contours. The turning point came in the 1970s, when the several events gave a radical turn to the women's movement. In the 1970s, the new women's movement attempted to revive the Uniform Civil Code within the framework of gender politics. But women's rights became articulated within a state-led reform agenda, reinscribing the concerns of national integrity, modernity, and progress. Now, if we go to another context, however, any specific categorization of time or space is bound to be challenged by historians and observers. Romila Thapar, writing in the first edition of her Indian Women, makes the point that participation of women in the independence movement led to greater participation of women in the post-independence era than their Western counterparts. To look into another kind of discourse, if we again go back, in 1939, the Congress Party set up a committee named Women's Role in Planned Economy, WRPE. It comprised women political leaders of those times. The committee gave a report that would match the informed recommendations in the current times. The report covered 7 areas: civic rights, economic rights, property rights, education, marriage, family, and miscellaneous issues. Nirmala Banerjee writes, the report of the WRPE is really worth our notice. Finally, this is another, I think, another perspective. An actor in the movement which played and still plays a leadership role is the movement. Madhuri Ben Shah, coming in as chairperson of the UGC, introduced the program on women's studies in the UGC in 1985. No doubt, it is a unique and lasting contribution to the women's movement. There are currently more than 70 women's studies centers, I am not accurate, established in various universities and colleges in India. Finally, the issue of violence, especially against women, the issue of women's rights as human rights, which are linked to the struggle against violence, and the political restructuring of the
honored guests. Professor of International Relations, JADAVPUR University, and Dr. Malini Bhattacharya and Dr. Malini Bhattacharya, former Professor of English, JADAVPUR University and former Director of Women's Studies. Dr. Purabi Roy will be felicitated by our Principal Ma'am, Dr. Madhumanjari Mondal. Ma'am will be assisted by Dr. Purabi Roy, Associate Professor, Department of Philosophy. And Ishita Sood, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Roy, and thank you, Dr. Shah. Dr. Malini Bhattacharya will be felicitated by our Vice Principal, Sir, Dr. Shubhadeep Das. Sir will be assisted by Professor Pradipta Roy, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, and Dr. Ishita Shul, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science.
Hello. He was a patriot. He was a revolutionary icon. So many things we can put before Subhash Chandra Bose. But here, Subhash Chandra Bose, as a social reformer, who took concrete steps to give women equal place in society. He did not believe tokenism. So, this from where it appears, Bose's reverence for women was derived from his deep respect for his mother. That he used to think that she is a Shakti or power. So, if we take in that manner, that Bose's influence, Bose came back from England 1921, and then he started his political activities with the guidance of Chittaranjan Das. He used to live in LD Road. So all his morning duty, according to Chittaranjan Das, that you have to go around the Bhavanipur area, all the whole South Calcutta that side, and then you start your daily work. And most what we used to do in the morning, around about 9:30, 10, he will be around Bhavanipur area. And he used to meet many people say. Actually, he used to go to Dr. Alaka Sen, a renowned doctor, lady doctor, who was in the same level of Vilangai and others, old medalists. And she had a small group of women there, including Vinadash, which is a well-known name. And I don't know whether you have heard about Bimal Pratima. She was also there amongst them. There are many other ladies there in a small group. And the first thing he will go to the Harish Park and Northern Park and that side, and then he will ask about the where is Bimal Pratima. Remember that it is 1921. So Bimal Pratima is a name or a movement in the movement she was there. She was born in 1901 in Odisha. And then she got married to a person from a very rich people in Bhavanipur area, that J.C. Banerjee's son married to Bimal Pratima. And Bimal Pratima came to Calcutta and started her life there only. And she was very close associate of Oliver Shen. Why you know? That time the revolutionaries, they always used to take shelter at Oliver's house. One thing. Second thing, Oliver Shen, being a doctor, she used to play a dual role. She used to visit the British people, used to do their treatment. She had a son also, but she decided to join the women's movement. So slowly she became very close to Subhash Chandra Bose. And her her movement started with being the member of Nadi Kormo Mandir. That time the Congress used to have Nadi Kormo Mandir. And she became the member of that place in 1921. If you go to see Subhash's, I have done it, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, that I find that Subhash's ideas are related to social and educative for the woman. Then, through various types of movements and political. These are the three areas Subhash used to work and used to give some sort of directions to the woman. Anyway, Vimal Pratibha became slowly very close to Subhash Chandra Bose. Every morning they used to meet and used to decide everything, and Alukashini, the doctor, she always used to help in that way. In 1921, she became the Nadi Kormo Mandir member. In 1927, and that time, again, later she was released, but again she had been put to the prison and remained here for 6 years in presidency jail. And at the same time, she was also distributing and picketing the Chattogram movement and was collecting money for that, for the case. And that was something unique in the women movement, as it was mentioned anywhere, Gandhi Chattogram, Vastragangunta. Now 31 is in Tripura. There was a students' meeting and association, and they had a big conference where Subhash Chandra Bose, Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay, and Vimal Pratibha. She was there. Can you imagine that she is going to the north to Bhagat Singh, going to the west to Gandhiji, going to the east Tripura, and of course the central part. And she opened that seminar and the conference there in Tripura. There was a very big conference which is mentioned anywhere in Subhash's writing. And later on, next day, there was a closed meeting. And that meeting was only conducted by Vimal Pratibha and Subhash Chandra Bose. There was Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay made a comment which I want to tell you in Bengali. আমি কি খালি উপন্যাসই লিখে চলবো? আমার কি সব দরজা বন্ধ করা মিটিংয়ে যাওয়ার অধিকার নেই? That was Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay's comment after that, during that meeting. And there only Subhash Chandra said that মেয়েরা লড়াই করে ছেলেদের সঙ্গে তাদের কাঁধ মিলিয়ে চলবে, shoulder to shoulder. That was Subhash's comment. তুমি তোমার লিখে চলো, তোমার বিভিন্ন রচনা বিভিন্ন ধরনের উপন্যাস লিখে চলো, আর এখানে ছেলে আর মেয়েরা কাঁধে কাঁধ মিলিয়ে চলবে। That was the feeling of Subhash, this very particular word, that shoulder to shoulder, which he brought it in the field, ultimately he brought it there. Then the year 1938, there was a committee organized, All India Prisoners Committee. And in that committee, the members were Muzaffar Ahmad, Niranjan Sengupta, and Niharendra Datta. More or less the three of the stalwarts and left orientation. And along with them was Vimal Pratibha. That was her first interaction and day-to-day meeting with the had a department when I was a brilliant barrister, and Niranjan Sengupta, who was the teacher of Shaptaha Patrika, so he was also very good founder, and of course Muzaffarnagar. So with these people, in coming in contact with these people, she realized, and by that time, by 37, 38, the Communist Party is already in a position that has been banned by my father-in-law, Chomba. But the party was banned by him, such a person. Anyway, so she thought that communist movement is a mass organization and she can do it and she will be more comfortable with those people. And she had a long talk with Dange. Dange also advised me about Dange that I feel that if you want to do more work, that will be the best place. By that time, 1940, Subhash was planning to leave India and she understood that without Subhash, her position will be difficult in this communist movement. Because communist movement, to tell you very frankly, it is good. With all plan, all over India they tried, but anyway, some sort of reservations and some sort of, what to say, mass movement from the left they did. That mass, the essence of mass movement was not there, which she felt. And then she thought, Yangi suggested that you go to Asansol area, the industrial belt, and if you want to do something for the workers, go there. In the meantime, she lost her husband. She lost her son, only son. So she decided that better to leave the house and she went to Asansol. She went to Asansol, and if you want to see her house there, she picked a small house in the bank of Damodar. She used to live alone there with a horse. Her horse was there with her. Any movement, if you go to any colliery, and if you ask there, now I'm working in the colliery belt, and there if you have been colliery, the other collieries, if you are going to ask, they will say 100 money. Why? As soon as she used to hear that some trouble is going on with the workers, immediately she will ride her horse and with a cane she will go there to stop it and to help the workers. And even today, there are people who talk about Bihar not as a such a complicated name, they talk about 100. So what happened that Subhash Bose later said, by the time she was left, that Subhash with that art deshe, বিমল প্রতিভার মধ্যে সর্বত্যাগী নারী বড় বেশি that she left everything. She lost her husband, she lost her other department son also, and she started helping the workers. Even Dange said that I found that really a girl who can help and improve the position of these workers. Anyway, in Asansol, her house is still there in a very dilapidated condition, but I'm trying to collected some money to restore it. And there, the horses taken and the 100 wali, there was a film made named 100 wali after about Vimal Pratima. That is also I'm searching in Delhi and Bombay to find out the copy of it. So that with all these things, the small house, if we can make a heritage home of Vimal Pratima, so the Vimal and the Pratima, the genius, will always remain with us. Thank you. Life is challenge, accepted. Life is a duty, perform it. And life is a journey, complete it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for taking us through the pages of history, for enlightening us about the struggles and achievements of women during the Indian freedom struggle. We will now move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Malini Bhattacharya, an author, scholar, translator, playwright, an activist in the women's movement. Dr. Bhattacharya is a retired professor of English and former director, School of Women's Studies, JADAVPUR University. Dr. Bhattacharya was elected to the Lok Sabha from JADAVPUR, West Bengal for the CPI. I can go on and on endlessly about ma'am, and it will cover the entire day. But again, we are deeply honored and glad to have her among us, and we are indeed looking forward to hear from ma'am.
Hello. Audible?
Yes.
It's a very great privilege for me to be here with all of you today. And it's also a great privilege because, as I was telling your principal, this is the first time I've had the good fortune to visit Scottish Church College. So I'm quite enamored not only by the activities of this college, but by this wonderful edifice which holds the college building. As Professor Purabi Roy has spoken on a very specific subject, particularly on one woman, a very remarkable woman, as you have heard. I was just telling her that this transition from one movement to another, from the national movement to the workers' movement, this is a very important transition which highlights the kind of turmoil in which society was at the time. But I propose to talk about some more general issues which have been included in the topic of this seminar. Movements and narratives and histories, movements, narratives. Why are they important for us as students of women's studies? This is something that I shall try to say a few words on. You see, when people like us entered into this area of women's studies, it was not such a respectable area at that time. It was not acknowledged on the academic campus. But when we first started exploring this area, we started with the exploration of absences and silences in many areas of knowledge, which before that had been regarded as gender neutral. We found that these areas were not gender neutral at all. We also found that in established history books, it was actually his story which was being foregrounded. And it was for us, students of women's studies, to discover hidden spaces in them where her story might have lain buried in the tomes of scholarship. Of course, as you know, in our history books, in the conventional history books that is, there are always chapters or at least paragraphs about women, like women in the Vedic ages, great women in the national struggle, women who promoted the cause of education, women who made some great sacrifices, or women sovereigns and women who fought in the battlefield against enemies, like Durgavati or Irani of Jhansi, or our own Captain Lakshmi Saigal, etc. In fictional narratives too, even male authors created strong women characters like Anna Karenina, Tess of the Daylongs, Devi Chopra. But what was lacking in most such materials, we felt, was the perspective, what we might call the woman's eye view. But, and this is where history comes as a lesson for us, history has always been a highly contested ground. It reconstructs times and spaces and relationships which are not directly present in front of us. We haven't, many of us, seen what happened in history. And therefore, the question of hard evidence, the need for verification, cannot be avoided. And this is what history teaches us. So, what we call a woman's perspective cannot be seen as a mystic or an instinctive possession of women, which is by definition beyond the reach of the non-woman. If exchanging the male-dominant view in history for the woman's eye view means exchanging one kind of bias for another, then the very objective of women's studies is defeated. So, women's studies must find evidence for alternative views of history that it may propose. Always has to be on the defensive. It always have to be ready with evidence to show. This evidence, of course, is often unconventional. It consists of reading texts from the underside, against the grain, as they say in literary terminology, of revealing self-contradictions within established canons, of using as texts what are normally, conventionally regarded as non-texts, like diaries, reported conversations, even gossip, myths, fairy tales. None of this is authentic history, but in all this, if we know how to read this material, then there is some matter which can enable us to understand the social structures, the social relationships, the matrix of social relationships within which we exist. Therefore, we have always touched our materials or used our materials with the basic proviso that it should be open to question, that if evidence is found to the contrary, then the premises must be revised. This is a lesson of history, and the women's studies person cannot avoid it. Let us take an example. Some scholars in the 1980s argued that in order to understand the traditional Hindu system of sati, or concremation of the wife on the husband's funeral pyre, They generated, as you know, an intense debate in the 19th century and led to an act prohibiting it. But these scholars in the 1980s, they were saying that in order to understand this historical phenomenon, it is necessary to go beyond the westernized elite view. What is the westernized elite view that they speak of? This latter merely regards sati as a coercive feudal practice from which women must be emancipated. But it fails to take account of many women of that time who made it a choice and faced the ordeal of fire with courage and even a sense of empowerment. Such accounts from available records, government records, of how women went to their husband's funeral pyre smiling and not caring one bit about the suffering. Such accounts are put forward by the above-mentioned scholars as evidence of the subject's authentic point of view, the subject meaning the sati herself. We certainly cannot deny that these records of voluntary sati are there. It is also quite true that the subjectivity of the sati in the 19th century or earlier cannot be constructed from a modern, Western educated perspective. We have to look at it in the perspective of the times. But should we not, when we examine this thesis of choice, should we not take several further steps backward, which this kind of scholarship that I have just referred to just refuses to do? Do we not have to admit that if the so-called westernized view of sati is a derivative construction, because we all know English, because we are all acquainted with Western culture, that is why we look at it in a different. So this is, our position is wholly a constructive position, a derivative construction. If this is so, then the subjectivity of the 19th century woman who willingly ascended her husband's pyre was as much of a construction of concept under very profound social pressure. It is only within the given circumstances of the pre-colonial era that the authenticity of voluntary sati can be understood. So, this is how we confront. This is also an approach. This would be an approach in women's studies. What I am saying is that there is a hollowness in this approach to sati. And as against this, history gives us records galore of women being coerced into conversation, of being tied down to the fire so that they might not escape, and records of the helpless plight of widows who survived somehow. Of course, it is invariably from accounts given by men that we know this. The widow who burned on her husband's pyre, of course, never spoke herself because she was socially and physically silenced. While materials for women's history can be gathered in various ways, even in this era of silence from indirect evidence, we enter a new epoch in women's history when women acquire a voice that reaches out to us comes to us how? From diaries, from reminiscences, and also from published writings of women, booklets, books, or articles which appeared in various journals. A beautiful term has been used by Rashundari Devi, whose reminiscences were the first women's reminiscences to be published in Bengali in the 19th century. Having attained literacy through her own unbelievably difficult efforts, she says, I'm saying it in Bengali, Ami Chita Kharagu. That is, I mastered the Bengalis. The English translation of this book, by Konika Sharma, the title of it is Words to Win. The woman gains mastery over the word, over the letter. The fact that a woman can master something that can compensate for her lower status in society is indeed a new turning, which in some way anticipated women's studies. Although, of course, in the formal sense, as it has been said earlier, in the formal sense, women's studies only comes to India in the 1980s. And in 1985, it first gains access into the university campus. However, women's access into the world of the written word in our country in the 19th century prepares the way for women's studies. Not merely in the sense, women's studies, not just in the sense of studies of women, but studies by women. Here, the woman is no longer a mere narrative in history, but she gets the opportunity to become herself the narrative of her own history. Women's literacy everywhere, not just in our country, but everywhere, it occupies a very crucial position in the evolution of the women's question. What I have given you here, however, is a compensatory model. That is, women have been deprived of certain things for a very, very long time. So they have to be compensated for that by being given entry into the world of letters. However, quite recently, some decades back, this compensatory model has been seen as a problem by some feminist groups. You read the writings by Ellen Schwalter or Celestina Eubank, find this question that they raise. They point out that there is a trap in the acquisition of literacy by women because it trains them to absorb the ideological bias inherent in any linguistic formation in a gender unequal society. If society itself is unequal, language in it is bound to be ideologically influenced by that. So, is a woman, by entering the world of letters, falling into that trap? That is, does literacy become a mode of co-option through which women consent and contribute to this structure of inequality? Some of these feminists even theorize on the possibility of an idiom closer to the spoken word, which might form the basis of a separate women's poetics. Now, I don't think it very viable. This is my personal opinion. I don't think it very viable. Spoken idiom, of course, has infinite varieties. There are turns of phrase, intonations, and accents which are more in use among women. I remember, phrases and turns of language which are used by my mother or by my mother-in-law, which I have never heard elsewhere. That is true. But these variations are not just gender specific, but also class specific and locality specific. And it seems to us that the endeavor to find an exclusively women's poetics or a feminist poetics or a language wholly uncontaminated by male ideology is a very utopian idea. On the other hand, in women's studies, mastery over the critical discourse in various disciplines is crucial. It becomes necessary to evolve from a mere listing of the sorrows and deprivations of women that you find everywhere. Like in Bengali, you have this medieval Bengali text where Kullorar Barmash, 12 months of a woman's suffering. So you get that kind of listing of deprivations. But we have to move from this mere listing towards a critical outlook which probes into the why and the how of specific ideological formations constituting our understanding. It's not by rejecting the hermeneutics of specific disciplines, the linguistic tools by hermeneutics, I mean, this is for the students, of course, I shouldn't be using this jargon, I have to use it. These are linguistic tools which are used by the different disciplines for the interpretation of phenomena. We have to use them, but we have to use them critically. And only then we can unpack the anomalies within those disciplines. And then again, this graduates towards self-reflexivity. That is the faculty of turning upon oneself, the critical outlook which we bring to bear upon all disciplines. Constantly questioning one's own premises. By acquiring this critical language then, women's studies can open outwards to enrich the overall scientific understanding of society vis-a-vis the women's questions. The compensatory model of women's literacy is then replaced by the alternative model of women's studies, turning linguistic tools into tools for social change. We have to admit that this theoretical advance towards the shaping of women's studies is the outcome of an engagement in the discourse of rights. This is what I had wanted to bring into the themes that you have spoken of. The discourse of rights. It's only when you speak of rights that you can enter into the critical arena and the self-critical arena. Earlier, women had not spoken about their rights. They had only spoken about their sorrows. As soon as they begin to speak about their rights, then through this engagement with the discourse of rights, they acquire this critical language. And while earlier women had remained condemned to silence outside the purview of critical language, they had their woes, which it was for the male reformers of the time to highlight. the silent subaltern, which is how she has sometimes been described, begins to speak when the discourse of equal rights is opened up. She turns into an active participant into movements which turn the tide of history. This is the root of feminism. So of course you can say that this voice of rights, the voice of the movement, this is a collective voice. But if you learn to read the collective voice is not a uniform voice. It's a voice which is full of multiplicity, which is full of nuances, which is full of, differences. It's not as if people who are in the movement talking about the same set of rights. It doesn't mean that they're talking in the same sense. So you have to learn to read into this language of rights, in the collective voice of rights. You have to try to understand the multiplicity, the various intonations, the various undertones, the various contradictions within that collective voice. It has been noted that the growth of women's studies within the academic academia has always been accompanied or preceded by some socio-political movement. In Europe and in the US, it was ushered into the campus in the 1960s in the wake of a strong students' movement challenging the very structure of the university. In India, a strong movement for democracy from the mid-1970s, which Vice President has referred to. This strong movement for democracy also gave birth to a nationwide movement among women. And women's studies was inspired by it to a large extent. It is this general social political turmoil that enabled women's studies to reach the bastions of the university campus and to make its own space in it as an interdisciplinary project. It was not as if, as soon as Madhuri Shah went into UAC, she gave a fiat. Let us have women's studies all over the country. It will be like that at all. Women's studies was happening all the time for quite a long time, several years. And what the UGC did at that time was to give it some kind of an academic legitimacy. But its subsequent establishment into this world also problematized its relationship with movements outside the campus. Once you get into the system, it is very difficult to be an activist and an academic at the same time. This combative politics of women's studies somehow had to be erased, and a more canonical character had to be imposed on it if it had to survive the modern campus. Even from its pre-formal days, a major query that has plagued women's studies is the relationship between the different aspects of social change. For instance, between the class aspect and the gender aspect. There have been people who have said that a change in the dynamics of class relationship, paring down of class inequality, will automatically eliminate gender inequality also. That you do the one thing and then the other thing will happen automatically. This view has been there. In the history of our freedom struggle too, there have been moments when women's demands for social or legal change have yielded to the priority given by national rulers to the attainment of political freedom. On the other hand, however, the tendency to isolate the gender aspect of change from larger political aspects exclusively to focus on the unchanging roots of patriarchy within the individual psyche is, as I find it, a very simplistic view of gender contributions. The evolution of the structures of production and reproduction of labor in society and their crucial role in molding human relationships cannot be avoided in women's studies. This introduces the dimensions of larger political and economic conflicts into the scenario of gender and contributions. Issues of caste, ethnicity, and race enter. The subjectivity of the woman is intertwined with her subjectivity as a laborer, as a Dalit, as a black person. Can we understand the problem of the girl child's undernutrition without analyzing how the class that she belongs to is being as a whole deprived of its nutritional needs? Can the inequality of an American black woman be made the subject of study without taking into account the unequal status of poor black people in America? Even as Angela Davis points out, the racism in the women's suffrage movement in the mid-19th century in America, this racism fractured the unity of white and non-white people. Similarly, here, I'm glad, in the writings of Alexandra Kollontai, we find how the call of the European suffragettes for all women to unite failed to address the basic problems of women factory laborers in Europe. It is for women's studies to achieve its objective of scientific understanding by taking account of all these contradictions. This is possible only when it is in touch with movements and with the history of movements. However, efforts must be made to nurture these extramural links, since the university campus these days, from my personal view, these days growingly it is encouraging isolationism and elitism. Even in women's studies, the tendency is towards seeing gender in separation from its broader political roots. Sometimes women's studies is regarded as identical with family studies, and the all-important lives of aspect of women's lives as laborers within and outside the family is completely erased. Patriarchy tends to be seen as a generality at the ideological level, and not as something which is reconstructed anew with other aspects of human relationships in changing social and political circumstances. The fact that reading a historical record and reading a literary text are not the same, that myth and history must be distinguished from each other in their implications as materials for women's studies, is not always kept in mind, because the links with actual movements on the ground. As a result, movements too are getting theoretically impoverished because the inputs from women's studies are not there. A new life has to be given to women's studies. This two-way engagement between movements and women's studies must be promoted. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that enriching and highly enlightening session, for taking us through the absences and silences in women's studies, and also for highlighting the role of non-texts. Students, now I'm going to open the floor for question and answers and discussion. and this session would be carried on forward by Dr. Ishita Shul from the Department of Political Science.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, both of you, for wonderful lectures. We have thoroughly enjoyed, but I'll not waste much time. And now the floor is open for question and answer session and discussion. So I would like our students to initiate the process. So first, I will ask you to introduce yourself, just name and department, and keep your questions very precise. Not observation at this moment because time is short. So let's start. Who is going to start? Please raise your hands. This is for students.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you so much for coming. I am from Chandanagar College and I am from 6th and History Department. Ma'am, my question is, after introduction of the subaltern studies, was there any change in the perspective on women's studies, on the books which were written on women? Specifically talking of history, what impact can we talk of after the introduction of subaltern history?
Thank you. Thank you. Can we take one more question, one or two more, and then we can go back to both of you and you can answer together. I think that will be better. At least one round. So much silence on women's studies.
Good morning, ma'am. I am Sri Ranjana Mitra Chaudhary from Department of Teacher Education, Scottish Church College. Now, I found something really interesting that you highlighted. It was about the voluntariness of sati. Now, do you think that the voluntariness of sati is somewhere ingrained in the deep roots of patriarchy? That a woman not realizing that my death is a violation of my human right to live. What do you think are the roots of it? Has she been silenced for too long by the patriarchy? Has she stopped thinking for herself? Or what is the cause of the voluntariness? Why is she wearing a smile even when she is accompanying her husband to the death? Thank you.
Thank you. One more? One more question? Okay, Moina.
I have a question for Dr. Bhattacharya. I am Malini Bhattacharya. I am from fourth semester Scottish Church College, Department of History. You said that it is your personal view that in today's time the universities or colleges have become isolationist. Ma'am, could you please just elaborate what you meant by it? Because in the context of Calcutta, we know that universities and colleges are much more proactive in societal movements. Thank you.
So we have one round of questions and 3 questions together. So we can start with the answers, and later I will come back to our faculty members so that they can also enrich us.
Well, I know I am the offender. I shouldn't have used that term, the silent subaltern at all. But it has been used for the woman who is dependent on and under the dominance of a patriarchal society, where her very voice has been taken away from her. Similarly, there are other grades of subalternism, like the boys of the Adivasis, the boys of the Dalit. These are voices which have been taken away so that the dominant discourse may win. So in that sense, it has been sometimes said, even by some subaltern historians, that women also are the subalterns of history. Now, yes, if in a general sense, if you want to say that women are subalterns in the sense in which there is a dominant ideology and they are subsumed under that dominant ideology. So in that sense, and they're guided by and they internalize these values. That is how they lose their own perception. Yes, that is true. But at the same time, you see, it is a word which tends to become too general because there are different kinds of silence, and silence is not always silence. That the subaltern is always silent, that she doesn't have any language of her own. It is a repressed language, yes. But I do not agree that you can say that Shudra described in Manusmriti, his tongue has been cut out because he uttered the Vedas. No, the subaltern's tongue has not been cut out. Sometimes we do not understand the language of the subaltern. Sometimes we do not hear the voice of the subaltern. And in the case of the woman, of course, it becomes an even more of a controversial term, because not all women belong to the same position, the same class of society, the same rank of society. So that, you see, when you find some women mastering the letters, you find lots of other women in the same society who are not allowed to enter schools. So it shouldn't be used as a blanket term. Sometimes it can be useful, but I think it shouldn't be used as a blanket term to explain everything in general. Secondly, voluntariness of sati. Well, please, I put voluntary within quotes.
Yeah.
I do not think that sati was ever voluntary. But in the 1980s, you know that there was this incident in Devrala, Rajasthan, and Lukkanwa. And there was this big movement among women against it because no one was taking any, the police was not taking any action, and that place had been converted into a sati skull, and muscular men were going around with swords around that place and collecting money. So the women protested against it. And at that time, it was said that these women are protesting because they do not understand how the psyche of the Indian woman is constituted. But I have never said, I would never say that sati is something voluntary. What I say is that if my view as an educated modern person is a constructed view, then the view of the woman who goes to her husband's fire without batting an eyelid, that also is a construction. It is the social pressure on her, the terrible social pressure on her, and the fact that she doesn't have anything else to do. Widow's life at that time, can you imagine what it was like? Do you know how many widows from so-called upper castes became turned into prostitutes because they had nowhere to go. So I don't think there is any voluntariness about it. It was the social pressure. In the isolation of the college campus, I don't really want to elaborate because then I'll have to talk about the new education policy, which is not our theme today. But I think that certain changes are taking place inside the campus. And even in places in Calcutta where you are very, I would say that you are very fortunate that you are studying in institutions where some mobility is still allowed for the student. You have something to look forward to. Yes. But the manner in which all these alternatives are being closed down for students and for teachers and for anyone who is associated with education, this is murderous for all academics, for all academic work, and it's murderous for women's studies. Do you know how many women's studies centers have closed down in the last 10 years? Yes, yours is a cell. You are lucky. You are lucky that it's a cell. If it had been a center, then you would be running around for money. So this is the situation. I don't want to elaborate on it, but things are changing very rapidly. And if we don't take action which will forestall this change, I think this kind of thing. And the division between movement and academics, between activism and academic work, this will become more and more.
Thank you, Malini ji, for this excellent insights. I mean, we have just wonderful moments and we are in front, that I can actually say. Now the floor is open for faculty members, and I can't wait to hear our faculty members' questions because that are going to be equally enlightening. Yes, please.
First of all, both the papers were brilliant. Really enjoyed it. I am Professor Malini Bhattacharya of the Department of History. I have a question for Dr. Roy. Now, Bimol Pratibha's husband or in-laws, can you please elucidate their roles, their reactions? Because that's something we don't know.
Next, sir.
Sir, does not need any introduction.
I have a question for Malini. We see that I am just going back a few years. When Bhattacharya is talking about an inner domain, Himani Banerjee is sharply criticizing Bhattacharya's discourses, and on the other end, Gayatri Spivak is talking about, is raising that seminal question, can the subaltern speak? So these are actually very varied perspectives on the same issue of agency of women. How do you actually observe? So, what are your comments?
I'm Shoma Mari. I teach history in Ramakrishna Sharada Mission, Vivekananda Vedanta Bhavan. But I don't have any courage to ask questions, but I can comment, especially on the quote-unquote voluntariness, which I know Malini can't say voluntary. I want to draw my students or the students here, their attention to Ashish Nande's reading on Shati, when in Madhya Pradesh, long after Rukh Kanwar in Dewarala, when I think a woman, I don't remember her name again, she committed sati, and there was a lot of readings on the post-structuralist, postmodernists who are actually reactionary to my reading, that they are saying that, I quote Ashish Nandi here because I have used that in my writing, that you have to actually glorify the courage of the women. So what courage? I think forcing them to jump into the fire of their husband. Is this a courage or is this a social pressure? And of course patriarchal pressure in different social locations. I agree with Malini about there cannot be a universal gender dimension. We have to locate it in different kinds of structures. Thank you.
Okay,
No, please. Thanks to both of you for your wonderful delivery. I'm Monalisa Basu from the Department of Political Science. I have a question for Professor Bhattacharya. That I really want to know what this women's cell or center, women's study centers are doing, or are they working to bridge the gap between academician and activist? Because we can keep on discussing, but again it will remain only just as an elite discussion until and unless all the subalterns or whatever alternatives we can talk about, it will never reach to the real people, to the real ground, until and unless we bridge the gap. I want to know just what this center or the cell are doing to bridge the gap. Thank you.
I'm Professor Roy, Assistant Professor in the Department of Political Science. My question is Professor Bhattacharya. That in Iran, women are fighting against hijab. It's not a choice, it's a compulsion. But in India, it's a matter of choice. Why so?
Okay, so we have received our questions. So one for Purabi and rest is for Malini. So let's start.
Father was Shurendra Mukherjee, who was with the Provost of Association in JADAVPUR. That was all the underground activities which are going on, and even today it is existing. Through that election, came to know many eminent and prominent personalities. That way, I met Justice J.C. Banerjee. Sorry, Mukherjee. And somehow or another, this Banerjee family, they got very much involved with this robot. That was the connection. Their house is in Ishwaraji. That they usually that. And then he negotiated He got married, but she joined the politics at the age of 15. 1901 she was born, 1918 onwards. The benefits of Shiva's Chakraborty. But movement and all very serious. Anyway, she never used to do much domestic work there because of all of that. She used to give her protection. That was a new need. It used to go very nicely. She had a son also. Son also was not looked after by his mother, but especially by mother. Somehow or other, she was very unfortunate in this matter. Because her husband was also Dr. Malini Bhattacharya. He died and at the same time, son also died. And another reason was, as I am telling you, that house, which I am going to restoring it to make it a heritage home. I am also searching for other relatives, so that there shouldn't be any objection from any side. I have to be very clear. But she lifted the house on her own. was working on the neck of Damodar, Sanskrit. And in his last days of life, not as a celebrity college or modern culture, till today, he is very popular in the whole conference of different communities of Sanskrit industry.
I should take up the last question or comment first. I don't know if hijab is a choice in our country. I wouldn't like to comment on that. What I do know is that, yes, in Iran, women are fighting against the hijab, and there is a government with very, very fundamentalist beliefs, but trying to put these means of control on. It's a means of control, there's no doubt about the recent hijab controversy in our country. I'll just say one thing. That is, I do not know whether those girls in Karnataka who were coming to college wearing the hijab, as you know, is different from the burqa. It just covers the head. And those who came wearing the hijab, whether they were coming because they thought of it as a fashion, whether they were coming because their families insisted that they can only go out wearing a hijab, whether it was the pressure of the community that was there on them, I don't know. What I do know and what I do report is that this is made an excuse to turn out some young women, probably, they're first generation girls who are coming to college. They're prevented from coming to college because they're wearing the hijab. Can you do that? I mean, if someone comes to my class, with Madhuri and Tika and everything, I can argue with her, but I don't have any right to turn her out, nor does the college have any right to turn them out. Because by doing so, what you are doing is you are sending them back right into the arms of Muslim fundamentalists. If they had been allowed to come to the college and get their education, probably they would have got rid of that. But now you are doing exactly what Muslim fundamentalists would have wanted. So that is my reading of this hijab issue. You have taken very big names about the Gayatri. I won't say anything at all because we have an old school time. So we are all from the same school. So I'm not going to say anything about that. I'll just say that that particular article, I think, is one of our worst articles. That is and you have to read, all you have to do is to read Ijaz Ahmed's. You have it. So you know how he has shown that this apparent analysis that Gayatri does of a particular case from her own family, how hollow it is, how unhistorical it is. I'm not going to about Partha Chatterjee's derivative discourse, it has to be taken much more seriously. But I would be more in agreement with Shimani Banerjee's view on that. I have also from time to time critiqued this view. Because you see, when you talk of derivative discourse, of course, Professor Chatterjee may not have meant it in that way. But, when you read it lightly, you tend to think that, all these 19th century reformers, they're nothing but British lackeys. because they got an English education, they were saying all these things that do away with sati, do away with have widow remarriage and so on. No, there is another term which we can bring in here to not to counter derivative discourse, but as a warning signal that everything is not derivative, that in the 19th century, what we find is not entirely derivative, but we find the very interesting birth of what I would call an indigenous modernity, which is very different from the westernized modernity. This is something you find in Ramu, this is something you find in Rabindranath, in many others. And the third question was women's studies centers, what they are doing. You see, this is the problem of becoming a part of the system, that you have to abide by the rules of the system. So now you have to wait for your funding from the center or from UGC or from whatever. You have to, for projects, today without projects, no center can live. So for projects also, you are dependent. Now my view is that, to all this, that it's a very hard life for the centers. For anyone who is doing any research work in India, it's a very hard life. But I would say that we should start from the other end. How we had, at the beginning, we were not related to the university campus at all. You see, people like Lotika Sarkar and Pendra Boshi, they had come out of the law school at Delhi University, and they had written an open letter to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, saying that the verdict that you have given in this Mathura case is a deplorable case. You see, that's the kind of courage. So, in that way, they became connected with the movement. So I think that it's from the movement, academics who are in the movement, it is for them also to build up or to replenish that link which is becoming Europe. Otherwise we can't have it. Individual efforts certainly, but yes, individuals are doing it all the time. But only when it becomes a collective movement. We have that, we have this IAWS, Indian Association of Women's Studies, and they are doing their best. Yes. But their work also is very sweet.
So now we are going to finish the first technical session, and before we finish, we have a few announcements for our students, and again from our college, from Women and Gender Cell and all the departments collaborating with the cell, a deep thanks to both of you for enlightening us from positive gender perspective. I think that is the most important thing of today's discussion. Thank you. Thank you once again, students. Now we are going to disperse for lunch. Please assemble back in around 35 to 40 minutes time. We are going to begin our next session by 1:35. There is on lunch. For lunch, the students will be assembling in room number 3. And one very important announcement now for the paper presenters. Paper presenters in the seminar hall, I'll be calling out their names.
Sweta Jaiswara, Victoria Institution College. Rajkishore Mukherjee, Scottish Church College. Shuchanda Banerjee, Chandannagar College. Anushka Ghosh, Ramakrishna Sharada Mission, Vivekananda Vidya Bhavan. Ikshita Pal, Victoria Institution College. Sneha and Koshi, Shadnik Nag. Sri Ranjana Mitra Chaudhuri, Shondipan Chaudhuri, Ambarin Farid and Shobnik Vishwas from Scottish Church College. We will be in the seminar hall. All the BEd teacher education students who are the audience will remain in the seminar hall. All the other students will proceed to room number 9. The presenters for room number 9 are Shreya Goswami, Ramakrishna Sharada Mission, Vivekananda Vidya Bhavan, Dipto Rangopadhyay, Scottish Church College, Munima Boyati, Ramakrishna Sharada Mission, Vivekananda Vidya Bhavan, Pratyusha Ghosh, Scottish Church College, Sanjana Day, Scottish Church College, Aheli Shen, Ramakrishna Sharada Mission, Vivekananda Vidya Bhavan, Monoskrita Das, Scottish Church College, Indrani Das Mahapatra from Ramakrishna Sharada Mission, Akash Singh, Jayadipur Mukherjee, Scottish Church College, Shongita Bera, Ramakrishna Sharada Mission, Sri Ranjana Mitra Chaudhuri, Scottish Church College, and Mela Kundu, RS Ramakrishna Sharada Mission. These are the students who are going to room number 9. Once again, thank you very much all of you for being here, and I thank our guests. And may we all kindly proceed. The students first, the guests will be leaving. Please be in your seats. Kindly wait for our honorable guests to proceed. Thank you.
Just one announcement for the students. After this small lunch break, we expect all of you to come back to be more knowledgeable. So please, I hope you have got the message.